Welcome to Inside the Ivy on Sports Report Radio. On the phone, a good friend of mine. Some people call him Senator. Some people call him Ambassador. Some people call him Director of National Intelligence. I call him a friend. Dan Coates, number one Cubs fan in the country. Welcome to Inside the Ivy on Sports Report Radio.
Kyle, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be on with you.
Dan, let's talk about your love for the Cubs. I know a lot about you and your love for the Cubs through our travels around and talking to you in the past. When did you fall in love with the Cubs, your wife, and how's everything involved the Chicago Cubs?
Well, I fell in love with the Cubs probably before you were born. I was 9 years old, born and growing up in the town called Jackson, Michigan, which is in southern Michigan. And my aunt, who lived across the street from us and then moved to Chicago, wanted me to come and visit my cousin in Chicago. So my mom put me on the train that ran from Detroit to Chicago. I was 9 years old. My aunt and uncle met me at the train station for a weekend with my cousin in Chicago. First time to go to the big city. I was just in awe because they took me around, showed me all kinds of things, but in the background, it seemed like constantly in the background was the voice of the Cubs. The TV of the Cubs way back in 1952 didn't have HD. It was pretty tough to watch, a small screen, but there they were, some of the first WGN, and I just fell in love with them on that. I came home after that as a 9-year-old, and from that point forward till right now when we're talking, the love of my life has been the Cubs, and the second love of my life was a girl I met at college, which happened to be in the suburbs of Chicago, and she happened to grow up in northern Chicago and was a rabid Cub fan also, and so it was a marriage made in heaven. And so those two loves of my life, the Cubs and my wife, have been with me ever since that beginning.
Wow, Dan, that is an awesome story. Can you imagine now putting a youngster on a train from from Michigan up there? I mean, my gosh, I don't think that would ever happen. What simpler times we did live in many, many years ago. But, great start with you with the Cubs. But let's talk about some of your experiences with the Cubs. You've thrown out the first pitch at Wrigley Field. What's that like for you to walk up there and throw out a first pitch at Wrigley Field?
That was scary because I thought I might throw it in the dirt or over the catcher's head. Marcia, my wife, had planned this whole thing as a surprise. She said, yeah, we're going to go to a Cubs game, but she had worked it out with the Cubs. We had seats right there by the dugout. They brought us in early. They took me into the clubhouse. They introduced me to the players. They said, okay, it's time to throw out the first pitch. It was my 50th birthday. Actually, on that one, I think I hit the corner. Some people will say it was outside. But anyway, it was a thrill of a lifetime, and they put your name up on the scoreboard and so forth. And then our 50th anniversary, which was not all that long ago, we went back. I didn't get to throw out the ball. I didn't ask to throw out the first ball. But so the 50-50 were two major times in our life, and we were with the Cubs, and that made me very happy.
Hey Dan, let's talk a little bit about the ownership of the Cubs. You knew the Tribune company back in the day and knew ownership, the Ricketts family now. What's it been like for you to be able to see these two great groups own the Cubs and know what they've done for the Cubs, and I mean just built the Cubs franchise and that brand just out there just tremendously?
Well, the Tribune took the Cubs national. They played in the afternoon. They were the only team that played all their games during the daylight. And so people all across America, retired and people from work coming home and so forth, would turn on the television, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3, so forth, and watch the Chicago Cubs. And so with the Tribune, the Cubs became national favorites. And as you know, Kyle, when you go to stadiums everywhere to watch the Cubs. It's not in Chicago. There's almost as many Cubs fans there as there are fans for the team that they're playing. And then moving to the Ricketts took the Cubs to another level. I mean, they came in, hired the right people to manage, drafted the right people to play, and then broke that 108 years, can you believe it? I broke that finally by winning in 2016, and it never could have happened without the Ricketts. And then the renovation they have put into Wrigleyville and to Wrigley Field is just amazing. You and I have been there and seen that, what it is. So we've seen it, what it used to be, all the way back, and all the memories of the surroundings and so forth. And now what it is, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place to go and watch a baseball game.
Let's talk about that magical 2016 season. I can remember sitting in the stands. It's you and I, my son Lucas, Game 6, getting ready to go to the World Series. We're up, and there's a foul ball over close to the Bartman area, and we look at each other and think, oh my goodness.
No, it can't be this.
It can't be this. But what was it like, Dan, to sit there at Wrigley Field to know that the Cubs won and are going to the World Series? How special was that?
It just chills up your spine, and the thought that you're, after 108 years, thousands and thousands of people that have wanted to be in a place where the Cubs were going to go to the World Series and then ultimately win the World Series. It was the thrill of a lifetime.
Hey, Dan, let's talk about this year. You were out at spring training. You saw the last game of the Cubs this year so far. Hopefully we get some more baseball. What was it like this year being in Mesa at spring training, seeing that great facility that the Ricketts and Mesa, Arizona's put together? But you were there. What was that like, Dan?
Well, we were all set to go because we had tickets for 2 days. One was a night game and one was a day game. And on the night game, the Cubs won that game. And the next day, all of a sudden, everything was shut down. And so all the people who traveled from around the country to go to Mesa to watch the Cubs really were disappointed, obviously, that shutdown occurred at that particular point in time. But I wanted to be positive about it. So my feeling, the Cubs are 1,000. They're batting 1,000. They're 1,000, and I'm just anointing them. If we don't get baseball back here before the season is over, I'm anointing the Cubs as a second World Series win because they had a perfect record.
Absolutely. That is great. So, hey, Dan, let's talk about the old spring training facility. I can remember you telling me some stories about taking the kids out there to Arizona back a long time ago, about what it was like a long time ago. And I don't mean a long time ago, it's disrespectful, but I'm talking about growing up, taking the kids out there to Arizona and just how special it was for your kids to develop a love of the Cubs, to follow your love and also Marcia's love of the Cubs.
Well, Marcia's parents had moved from Indiana to Scottsdale, and they so we took the family out every winter, and then went to the Cubs games. At that time, it was downtown Scottsdale. It was a kind of, it wouldn't even look like a single A stadium. But it was old-fashioned stadium, and people would walk over there with their lunch, make a lunch break, maybe lawyers working 2 blocks away or something like that and so forth. And we would take the kids there and introduce them to the Cubs. And, Kyle, there probably weren't more than sometimes 50 or 75 people in the stands just doing when they were doing the training, not the games. But I don't think the stadium held more than about 4,000 or 5,000 people for the games. And it was old school baseball. After the training session, the kids would go down on the field and they would get signatures from the players and so forth. And now, when you compare that with what's happening in Mesa, I mean, it's just night and day. But it sure took you back a long ways. Don Zimmer was the coach way back, and then the manager, way back then. So, and the kids got to meet Ernie Banks, and they got to meet some of the let's see, gosh,
Oh, a lot
Names
of
are
them.
escaping me.
Oh,
Oh, a lot of them. Got a lot of them. Run.
I
Yep.
mean, it's like the players were out there. But Dan, let's jump back to Wrigley Field and let's jump in to think historic park, baseball place in a neighborhood. You've traveled the world on a lot of different things in the world. What is Wrigley Field like for the person and the fan that hasn't been there? How can you describe Wrigley Field to them as a park in a neighborhood?
I think it represents what the whole 20th century and now one fifth of the 21st century. That represents you can sit in the stands at Wrigley Field, and you don't know whether it's 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, and on. Obviously, some modernization took place, but it still was a ballpark that was created a long, long time ago, and you still feel that. And so it's like walking into the first round of the Masters down in Augusta. Wow, there's nothing. I've seen a lot of golf courses, but nothing like this one. And so when you walk into Wrigley, it's wow. This is what baseball has been for more than a century. And really, I mean, yeah, the seats are a little bit different. Maybe the hot dogs are better or whatever. You feel like you could be in any era of that. It's baseball in its essence. And there's only two places like that left, and that's Fenway and Wrigley. And Wrigley, with the vines on the wall and the way it's constructed, it just is a special, special place. And you can't get it anywhere else.
Dan, I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to talk to us about the Cubs. I know about your love of the Cubs. We're friends, and you know what I look forward to doing is I know what one of your goals is to work at Wrigley Field, and maybe spend some time up there. But as life progresses and maybe you get an opportunity to do that up at Wrigley Field, doing some fun jobs, kind of like Todd Ricketts did with on the Boss Show there. I mean, my goodness, I look forward to reliving that with you at that point. But Dan, thank you so much for talking to us on Inside the Ivy. Lifelong Cubs fan, great stories, and probably from one of the most respected persons in the world. I can't thank you enough, Dan. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Kyle, it's a pleasure to be on your show, but it's also a pleasure to be your friend, and it's been a pleasure to go to games together, and we got to make sure we keep doing that.
I think we got a few more in the pipeline, Dan. Thanks. Great
You
talking
betcha.
to you, Dan. Thank you.
All right. Take care.